The hill that I am currently standing on here in northeast Kentucky is known as Rattlesnake Ridge, and not too far from here there was a church service that was going on, and two drunken men showed up with moonshine whiskey and tried to sell it to those going to church. Well, one man there, he was with the law, and he tried to put a stop to it. Things turned violent, and things turned deadly.
Forgotten by time, lives ended by the hand of someone else in cold blood. We finish their stories because they were not able to finish their own. You're watching Vintage Murder, a Whit Docs series. Not too far from where we stand today, there was a quiet little church with a quiet little congregation who did nothing out of the ordinary on this particular Sunday. It was a tradition in those days. You'd gather your family and either walk or perhaps take a horse and buggy to those small country church houses. Amazing Grace, How Sweet the Sound, or I'll Fly Away, Oh Glory, would echo off of the wooden walls, striking a familiar chord with all those in attendance. It was a way of life for a lot of people in these hills. Now, we wouldn't dare pretend that every person was perfect in 1935, but in general, there were a few lines that you just didn't dare cross. In those days, churches were respected, and most dared not to make a scene or any sort of disruption to the service. Pastors were looked to for comforting words and guidance as the parishioners worked their way towards eternal salvation. There was a sense of reverence surrounding the church. That sacred threshold that was not to be crossed was desecrated when John Barker, aged 22, and Virgil Mock, aged 25, appeared on the grounds of the church. Barker carried a half-gallon of moonshine whiskey with a string tied around the neck of the jar, and both men were looking for trouble. Even today, jokes are made about the making of moonshine in these hills. Make no mistake, those stereotypes are based in truths about the hardship of the day. Of course, there were those producing this harsh form of corn liquor for their own consumption, but for a lot of them, this underground and illegal drink was sold. Times were not easy here, and people did what they could to survive, and this was not an uncommon practice. Whether or not John Barker or Virgil Mock actually intended to peddle their goods to the church members is unknown, but when the drunken duo showed up to the grounds that day, they tried. Enter into our story James Parsons, aged 66. You've already seen his gravestone in the video. He was a man of the law, a deputy constable. He was there, and his sense of humor with the troublemakers had officially reached zero. Deputy Parsons was not looking for trouble, nor was he looking to have a run-in with these vagrants, but his duty to his badge and his duty to protect and serve would have to go on public display in the most tragic way possible. Barker and Mock were drinking heavily, intoxicated, and looking for trouble. Deputy Parsons, who was walking on a cane, would make his way towards Barker. "You're under arrest." Barker, upon hearing this, began to make a run for it. "Catch him," Deputy Barker would exclaim to the crowd around him. When Barker began fleeing, things turned serious in a hurry. It was at this time that Virgil Mock pulled a firearm and pointed it directly towards Parsons. Mock, in his evil voice, would say, "Stop, or I will kill you." Parsons did not back down and made his way towards Mock. As he was moving in for the arrest, Mock fired, striking Parsons. Parsons again did not back down. He would take the cane that he was using to walk with, muster up the remaining strength that he could find, and proceeded to beat Mock with it. Mock would open fire and hit Parsons just below the heart. Parsons, deputy and defender of the law, would die instantly. Upon the fatal blow, Mock and Barker would escape into the hills surrounding this area. The coroner and county attorney made their way to the scene as soon as they heard of the tragedy. Upon their investigation, they found that this crime was wholly without justification, and warrants were issued for their arrest. Parsons was survived by his widow and 3 children. There was indeed an inquest into the cause of the violence, and it was found that Mock had told several people that he intended to show up that Sunday and kill the pastor, Reverend Ned Carroll. Reverend Carroll was actually delivering a sermon at the time of the murder. The reason for the bad blood that Sunday is that the pastor had heard that Mock was going to show up to cause trouble. It was an easy assumption due to the fact that Mock was out running his mouth to that very intent. Upon hearing this, Pastor Carroll had made an effort to get law enforcement to show up to deal with the supposed trouble. The funeral for James Parsons would be held at Sulphur Springs Baptist Church with burial in this cemetery. The newspaper would say that the cemetery is near where the shooting occurred, so we are very near to that location today. Now with this story, there are several loose ends to tie up. Some of the loose ends will remain loose. I did an in-depth search of the suspects in this case. First, let me say, I found no official records of any arrests or trials ever made. I found similar profile descriptions of the 2 men that could possibly be the suspect, with stats that could point to them being the same guys. Both were from that area and went on to lead what appear to be normal lives. Without any sort of records or newspaper articles of the day, I just can't say for a fact it was them. Therefore, I can't say what happened to the suspects after this. I use publications and articles of the day for my videos and research, and none exist for the suspects. The only source that I could find was from the Officer Down Memorial page that stated that the man that shot Parsons was convicted of murder and sentenced to 10 years. So we just don't know. I also searched the Reverend Ned Carroll and found no results either. We have a clear article of what happened that particular day, but after that, the facts are simply not there for us to find. Whatever the case may be, we want to honor the life of Deputy Parsons. Another small-town tragedy, another story from a time gone by, another vintage murder. Forgotten by time, lives ended by the hand of someone else in cold blood. We finish their stories because they were not able to finish their own. You're watching Vintage Murder, a Whit Docs series.